Why are mothers still treated as secondary earners? This functions as discrimination against mothers. The system's architecture consistently treats mothers as secondary earners, even when they are not. It's a structural bias that comes from old laws and economic models, not from mothers' abilities. When a system ranks one partner above the other, imbalance is built in. Women are economically exploited, financially erased, and structurally disadvantaged by a system built long before we all were born. Women are shouting because the system exploited their labor and treated them as secondary earners. They're done with the architecture that absorbed their identity under a husband and erased their economic worth. This isn't slavery, it's structural economic harm, and naming it accurately gives women power, not silence. Well into the late 20th century, married women in many countries could not open bank accounts, obtain credit, sign loans, or purchase property without a husband's approval. These restrictions institutionalized economic dependence. Women are still labeled as secondary earners because marriage and wage systems were built on centuries of legal and economic design that positioned men as the primary financial actors. Roman property law evolved into coverture, industrialization entrenched the male breadwinner model, and modern institutions continue to carry the remnants of that architecture. The idea that a married woman's income is secondary is structural. The system knows what it's doing because it does not do the same to military married women. Military women are paid as full incomes, not secondary incomes. They are paid the same as counterparts. In the U.S. military, pay is rank-based, not gender-based. A married woman, E5, earns the same as a married man, E5. Benefits, BAH, BAS, TRICARE, are identical regardless of gender. The system does not assume her income is supplemental. And this is not because the military is progressive, it's because the military is hierarchical. Rank overrides everything. The military cannot function if pay is unequal. It would destroy discipline, morale, and chain of command. I'm not getting sidetracked on how women are treated in the military or how hierarchy shapes that system. I'll save that for another time. Right now, I'm staying focused on the civilian architecture, the one that absorbed women under husbands and kept coverture alive long after the law ended. Coverture eals the legal doctrine that said, a married woman has no legal identity. Her husband absorbs it. Civilian women are treated as secondary incomes because civilian marriage was built on coverture, a system that made husbands the sole legal and financial actors. Civilian systems still carry the old architecture, even after the laws changed. Under coverture, her wages belonged to him, her property belonged to him, her labor belonged to him, her legal identity belonged to him. This is wrong on every level. This created the primary income versus secondary income model. Even after coverture was abolished, the architecture stayed. Civilian systems still assume one breadwinner, one caregiver, one primary income, one secondary income, even when reality doesn't match. Under coverture, a married woman's legal identity merged with her husband's. Her wages, property, and contracts were absorbed into his authority, establishing the template for male financial primacy. Industrialization reorganized labor around the single-earner household. Men received the family wage while women were expected to perform unpaid domestic labor. This cemented the norm that the husband's income was the economic core of the household. Joint filing systems and income splitting models often tax the second earner at the household's highest marginal rate. Mathematically, this makes the wife's earnings appear less valuable, reinforcing the secondary income label. Women continue to perform the majority of unpaid domestic labor and childcare. This pushes many into flexible, part-time, or lower-paid roles, reinforcing wage disparities. Childbirth and early childcare create gaps in employment that slow wage growth, promotion trajectories, and pension accumulation. These interruptions compound over decades. Female-dominated fields, caregiving, teaching, administration, are systematically undervalued and underpaid compared to male-dominated sectors. Modern workplaces reward employees who can work long, unpredictable hours without domestic constraints, a model historically built around men with wives at home. Married women are assumed to be less committed. Mothers are assumed to be less available. Men are assumed to be primary earners. These assumptions depress women's starting salaries and advancement opportunities. The pattern is the result of legal architecture, economic design, and cultural inheritance, not innate differences. Modern wage systems still operate on frameworks built when women were legally and economically invisible. Coverture was abolished, but the architecture stayed. When coverture ended on paper, the legal doctrine disappeared, but the economic design built around it remained fully intact. Modern tax law still assumes one primary earner and one secondary earner, penalizing married women through marriage penalties, joint filing structures, and benefit formulas that reward the higher earner and erase the lower one. The workplace inherited the same skeleton. Jobs were designed around a male breadwinner who had a wife at home, so women entering the workforce were treated as supplemental labor, paid less, promoted less, and expected to absorb caregiving without institutional support. Retirement systems followed the same pattern, tying long-term financial security to continuous paid employment, which mothers and wives were structurally prevented from maintaining. Even today, women retire with dramatically less because the system still treats unpaid labor as invisible. Motherhood expectations carried coverture forward culturally. Girls were groomed from childhood to believe marriage and caregiving were their destiny, ensuring a steady supply of unpaid labor that kept the economic architecture running. The moment a woman becomes a mother, the system reactivates the old hierarchy. She is expected to sacrifice, reduce work, absorb domestic labor, and support the husband's career, exactly what coverture once demanded legally. Marriage culture reinforces this by romanticizing female sacrifice, normalizing male entitlement, and framing women's unpaid labor as love rather than economic contribution. The result is a modern marriage model that still absorbs women socially and economically, even though the law no longer says it outright. This is why so many of our lived experience makes perfect sense. Coverture ended in statute books but survived everywhere else. In taxes, workplaces, retirement formulas, motherhood norms, and the cultural story of marriage itself. The architecture stayed, and women were still groomed to fit into it. We are not imagining the harm. Many of us are finally seeing the structure that caused it. The system was built in a way that kept mothers economically tied to marriages, even when those marriages were harmful. When a structure is designed around hierarchy, it cannot produce balance, stability, or happiness inside a family. A hierarchical marriage model will always tilt power toward one partner and trap the other.